Oh boy, this is a sad tale. Admittedly a little long, but it's interesting. From Gonzo. He says, at a Bible discussion group I went to this morning, I brought up that the Gospels were anonymous. My conclusion from that was that if the person won't even put their name on their writing and I can't know anything about them, how am I to trust them at all, much less trust that they're giving me a factual account of, as it happened, history? This seems to go beyond what much of religiously liberal scholarship asserts, which tends to simply be that you can't take the Gospels literally, but it doesn't necessarily speak about the intent of the author, or tends to assume that the authorial intent has integrity. It seems to me that the simple fact of gospel anonymity makes it so that thousands of years later I have to be agnostic as to whether or not the Gospel writers are purposeful spin doctors. This one basic thing, the possibility being equal that the Gospel writers could be deceivers, makes any Bible-based Christianity impossible for me. First question then, do you think that is right, or is that going too far? Let me pause. I would have to say that whoever wrote the Gospels certainly seemed to have an earnest moral agenda. Otherwise, why bother with stuff like the Sermon on the Mount? And I would be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they thought at least the basic outline of events they were portraying happened, even if they were wrong about it, right? I would be surprised if they were wholesale deceivers, though there are places where you have a little chicanery going on. Like, how come I never heard of the empty tomb until now, decades later? Oh, well, you see, that's because the women who were told to give the message to Peter disobeyed the angel. Yeah, that's the ticket. Well, then how do you know about it, young feller? Oh, well, look at the time. I got to run. Things like that. I mean, there are occasional spin elements, but I have to admit that even a pious fraud intends to be pious, so there's no point in the fraud. You're kind of cheating to inculcate morality, but then that's just the problem, right? If you can have a pious fraud, the apparently sincere moral intentionality doesn't guarantee any degree of truth-telling. You know, they've poisoned the well. So I think your suspicion is correct. After all, you're not saying, oh, yeah, I know they got to be a bunch of liars since they didn't give their name. You're not going that far. So, yeah, it is. And plus, even if they thought it was true, it matters whether they were in a position to know whether it was true. So I think you're right. Okay, back to Gonzo. So I was at an intellectual conservative Christian group, so the one I was discussing with admitted that that was a good point. He then asked me if a name to the source would add more validity for me. I said that I would have to make a judgment based on the context, but that a name certainly would have the possibility of adding more validity for me. Of course, you'd have to know who it was, even if the authors were named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These were not exactly uncommon names. Right? Anyway, then in a sarcastic manner, he predicted that I would find some way to disagree with the facts of what he was about to say, and proceeded to tell me that rabbis contemporary with Jesus write about how he was a righteous, miracle-working man, etc. I simply mentioned that, to my knowledge, all rabbinical attestation happened significantly after the time of Jesus. You're right, he's wrong. So he decried my disagreement, said he knew he was right about me, and that I'm so frustrating, raising his voice and interrupting me when I tried to speak as he insulted me for a good while. There's a man secure in his faith. Finally, I told him I wouldn't put up with his talking to me like that anymore, and said that I simply disagreed with his alleged fact, and that does not warrant that sort of way of talking with me when I was being polite and calm with him. Well, then he wanted to debate me as to whether or not it was appropriate for me to dislike his tangent, and in reference to me said that even a snake is calm when it bites you, because I'd mentioned I was being calm and polite with him. So my second question is simply about the rabbinic attestation. Is there anything anywhere near the time of Jesus that I'm just not aware of? Could the rabbinic sources be good sources for knowing something about Jesus because his life remained in the cultural memory of the Jews? Well, it's just like the Gospels, the mere fact that it might preserve accurate material does not mean that it necessarily does. That's just opening the question, not answering it. But in fact, there are no contemporary rabbinic reports. It sounds like this idiot was confusing Josephus, who at least is in the right century, but still that's too late, with the rabbis. Josephus, of course, has the passage, an interpolation, it seems to me, that has Jesus as a righteous man working miracles, but there's nothing about him like that in the Talmud. I include some of the context for my question simply to say that my process of slowly coming out of the closet as skeptical and more religiously liberal has been an excruciating process, as if losing my fundamentalism didn't throw me into enough of an existential crisis. All I need is more people that I know well telling me that my rejection of their beliefs is because I'm a horrible, deceitful person who's not dedicated to what's true. Boy, this is just character assassination. As with politicians, you know they resort to this only when they don't have any actual arguments to offer. Okay, back to Gonzo again. I'm only 21 and I'm already wondering if it's worth my time anymore. I'm glad I haven't committed to any degree in the Bible yet. So a less biblical and more advice-driven question. Is this whole process of affiliating and engaging with intellectual Christians worth the trouble? It all seems like a facade when they refer to the Gospels as the written record and other such descriptors, assuming historicity. And I find that the theological assumptions of what a skeptic must be always ruins the discussion. Advice for this depraved soul? Yeah, I say just forget it. You're just asking for frustration. There's just no point in playing their game. And either the way they want you to or the way they don't want you to. Just save yourself the trouble. I would, if you want to see what fundamentalists have to say about Bible difficulties, there are non-insulting books to be read. However, I would just look at new perspectives on it and see if they make any more sense than what you used to hear. So I would not darken the door of these people like this anymore. I don't mean to hate them, as I've already implied. They're insecure in their faith. They're really reacting against their own doubts. And why let them insult you as simply a way of beefing up their own false confidence? It's like the Gnostics. Don't cast your pearls before swine. What do you expect people to say? How do you expect them to react if they hear views like yours as a Gnostic or an agnostic, right? You know what they're going to say. What's the point? It's going to spook them, and they're going to act like a jerk like this guy did. Don't want to say he was a jerk, because I do hold open the possibility that it's panic mode and he's talking out of being threatened, but it's sad any way you cut it.